I've always thought I had it all: a beautiful wife, a stable career, and a life that, by all accounts, could be described as comfortable, if not perfect. Yet the word perfect never seemed to fit me. Not really. Underneath the polished surface of a happy marriage, I carried with me a secret, or rather, 3 secrets. Each of them was neatly hidden, safely tucked away in the corners of my life, and none of them, my wife nor the 3 women, knew about each other. There's a certain rush in living this way, a sense of control, and an undeniable thrill. But let me start at the beginning, the part where everything still seemed so normal. My wife, Lisa, is a wonderful woman. We've been married for 7 years. She is thoughtful, caring, and devoted. From the outside looking in, we are the epitome of happiness. Our friends envy us, neighbors look up to us, and family gathers around us at every holiday with admiration. But somewhere along the line, I got restless. It wasn't Lisa's fault. She gave me everything I could want from a partner. Still, the pull towards something else, towards other women, became irresistible. I didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat. It was more gradual than that. A glance across the room during a business event, a lingering conversation at the bar, and before I knew it, I had started to indulge in something darker, something secretive. The first time was with Olivia. She was a colleague, intelligent, witty, and with a sharp edge that intrigued me. I told myself it was just harmless flirting, that it wouldn't go beyond a few texts. But it did. Olivia became more than just a fling. She became a secret I cherished, a distraction from my daily life. Then there was Sarah, the woman I met at the gym. She was different from Olivia, softer, more emotionally involved. She filled a gap I didn't even know existed. With her, I could be vulnerable in a way I never could be with Lisa. It wasn't that Sarah was better or worse. She was just different. Finally, there was Jessica. Jessica was a mystery from the start. She worked at a cafe I frequented. There was something intoxicating about her. Her silence, her distant glances, the way she seemed completely unattainable. And yet somehow I made her mine, or at least a part of my life. Balancing these 3 women was more exhilarating than I'd ever expected. I'd become an expert at weaving tales, at timing phone calls and meetings, at making excuses that felt so seamless that even I started to believe them. The thrill wasn't just in the physicality of these relationships, it was in the deception itself. I thrived in it. But my life was becoming more and more compartmentalized. I was like a juggler, each relationship a delicate object I had to keep in the air. One misstep, and everything would come crashing down. At first, I didn't worry. I believed I could manage it, that I had mastered this dangerous game. After all, how could anyone find out? I was too careful, too clever. Lisa, bless her heart, never suspected a thing. Our routine was always the same. Morning kisses, coffee together, her preparing for her day as a kindergarten teacher, and me heading off to work. In the evenings, we would sit down for dinner, talk about our days, watch TV, and fall asleep like any ordinary couple. What she didn't know was that on certain nights, when I'd claim I had late meetings or business dinners, I was really seeing Olivia, or sometimes Sarah, occasionally even Jessica. Each woman believed they were the only one I was cheating on Lisa with. Each woman thought she was special, that she had unlocked something in me that no one else had. But that wasn't true. The truth was, I had unlocked something in myself. The thrill wasn't in the relationships. It was in the secrecy, the lies, the deception. It made me feel powerful in a way nothing else did. And yet, even as I reveled in the complexity of my web of lies, a part of me knew this couldn't last forever. One wrong move, one small slip-up, and my entire life could collapse. But for now, I'm still managing, still keeping it all under control. Or so I think. I should have stopped at one affair, maybe even 2. But when I met Jessica, something shifted inside me. With Olivia and Sarah, I could maintain a sense of control, boundaries even. They were the kind of relationships I could easily compartmentalize. But Jessica? Jessica was different. I remember the first time I saw her. It was a gray Monday morning, the kind of morning where the world seemed slightly out of focus. I was in my usual corner of the coffee shop, tapping away at my laptop, pretending to work. The air smelled of fresh espresso, and the usual crowd shuffled around me. That's when she appeared, quietly, almost unnoticed at first. She was behind the counter, serving customers without the fake cheer that most baristas put on. She moved with an aloofness that intrigued me. Her dark hair fell loosely around her face, her eyes distant and unreadable, as if she existed in a world separate from the rest of us. There was something about her silence, the way she barely acknowledged the people in front of her, that drew me in. I couldn't stop watching her, and over the next few weeks, I found excuses to be there more often. I'd come in before work, linger after meetings, even pop in during lunch breaks just to see her. It became my new obsession. Our interactions were brief at first. She'd take my order without looking me in the eye, her voice low, almost indifferent. It took weeks before I managed to break through her icy demeanor. A joke about the weather, a compliment about her necklace, small, insignificant things that slowly chipped away at her cool exterior. It wasn't until one afternoon, when the cafe was nearly empty, that she finally spoke to me beyond the routine pleasantries. "You come here a lot," she said, her voice softer than I expected, with just the hint of curiosity. I smiled, feeling a flicker of victory. "I like the coffee," I replied, even though we both knew that wasn't the reason. She raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching into the faintest hint of a smile. "Right, the coffee." And just like that, the spark ignited. The next few weeks were a slow burn, filled with fleeting glances, casual conversations, and moments that felt electric with unspoken tension. I had become addicted to the chase once again. It was like starting over, the excitement of something new, something forbidden. Jessica was unlike the other women. With Olivia, it was all about the thrill of intellect. With Sarah, it was about vulnerability and emotional connection. But Jessica? She was a mystery, a puzzle I couldn't quite figure out. She never revealed too much, never let me in completely, and that only made me want her more. We didn't sleep together right away. In fact, it took months before our flirtation turned into something physical. But when it did, it was unlike anything I had experienced before. With her, it wasn't just about the act, it was about possession, about feeling like I had conquered something untouchable. She made me feel alive in a way the others didn't. With Jessica, every moment was a game of power and control, a delicate dance where neither of us wanted to show our hand. There was always an edge to her, a darkness that mirrored my own, and I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. But with that darkness came danger. Jessica wasn't the type to play by the rules, and I knew, deep down, that keeping her a secret would be harder than with Olivia or Sarah. She was too sharp, too aware, and too unpredictable. There were times when I thought she might already know about the others, that maybe she was playing her own game, but I couldn't be sure. Our encounters were always intense, filled with passion and tension that bordered on something dangerous. I became addicted to her, to the way she made me feel, and before long, I found myself tangled in yet another secret I had to keep hidden from Lisa and the other women. Balancing 3 affairs was no small feat, and I had become a master at managing time, at spinning stories so convincing that even I started to believe them. But with Jessica, it felt like I was playing with fire. She wasn't someone who would be content with being a hidden piece of my life forever. Sooner or later, she would want more, and I wasn't sure if I could give it to her. As the weeks went by, I could feel the walls closing in. The lies were becoming harder to maintain, the stakes higher with each passing day. Olivia was growing suspicious of my absences. Sarah was starting to demand more of my time, and Jessica, well, Jessica was becoming more dangerous with every encounter. Yet, despite the looming sense of doom, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. Each relationship gave me something the others couldn't, and as twisted as it was, I needed them all to feel complete. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I became more skilled at crafting the lies that held my life together. Each woman had her place, her role in my twisted little world, and I became an expert at keeping them separate. With Lisa, my wife, life continued in its usual rhythm. We shared quiet mornings together, planning our weekends, and making small talk about our friends and family. Lisa never asked too many questions. She trusted me, and why wouldn't she? I was the model husband, always home for dinner, always attentive to her needs, always loving and kind. The guilt that gnawed at me in the beginning had dulled over time. Now, it felt like a small price to pay for the life I had built, a life where I could have everything I wanted. But it wasn't always easy. Olivia, the first woman, had started to grow suspicious of my disappearing acts. She was sharp, too sharp for her own good. And every time I canceled a date or arrived late, she would raise an eyebrow, her mind working through the possibilities. I could see it in her eyes. She was starting to piece things together, though she hadn't confronted me yet. "Late again?" she had asked one evening, her voice tinged with just enough sarcasm to make me uneasy. I had smiled, leaning in to kiss her. "Work's been insane lately," I lied, slipping into the role I had perfected over the months. "You know how it is. Deadlines, meetings, the usual." Olivia had frowned, her arms crossing over her chest as she stared at me, as if weighing my words. "You've been working a lot lately," she said, her voice more serious now. "Maybe too much." I laughed it off, changing the subject with ease, but the unease lingered. Olivia was smart, and it wouldn't be long before she started digging. I could feel it in the air, the tension that simmered between us whenever I was late or distracted. And then there was Sarah. Sweet, vulnerable Sarah, who had fallen in love with me in a way I hadn't expected. I had always known that she was more emotionally invested than the others, but it wasn't until recently that I realized just how deep her feelings ran. "I was thinking," she said one evening as we lay together, her head resting on my chest. "Maybe we could spend the weekend together? Just the two of us. Somewhere quiet, away from everything." Her words were like a dagger, cutting through the thin veneer of control I had been clinging to. A weekend away? That was impossible. There was no way I could disappear for an entire weekend without raising suspicion. Not with Lisa at home, waiting for me. Not with Olivia texting me every few hours, wondering where I was. I smiled, trying to hide the panic that surged through me. "That sounds amazing," I said, my voice as smooth as ever. "But I'm swamped with work right now. Maybe in a few weeks?" Sarah's face had fallen, but she didn't push. She never did. That was the thing about Sarah. She was too trusting, too willing to accept my excuses. But even she had her limits, and I could feel the weight of her expectations pressing down on me. She wanted more than I could give her, and it was only a matter of time before she started demanding it. And then, of course, there was Jessica. If Olivia was suspicious and Sarah was demanding, Jessica was something else entirely. Dangerous, unpredictable. There was a part of me that knew I should end things with her before it spiraled out of control, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The attraction, the intensity, was too strong. Jessica didn't play by the same rules as the others. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. But there was something in the way she looked at me, something that told me she wasn't as oblivious as I wanted to believe. She knew there were other women, I was sure of it. But rather than confronting me, she seemed to enjoy the game. One night, as we lay tangled in her sheets, she turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she whispered, her lips curving into a sly smile. I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Jessica shrugged, trailing a finger down my chest. "You think you can keep all your secrets, but secrets have a way of coming out." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Was she talking about my other affairs? Did she know more than she was letting on? My mind raced, but I forced myself to stay calm, to play it cool. "I don't have any secrets," I said, smiling in that easy, practiced way I had perfected over the years. Jessica's smile widened, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she leaned in and kissed me, her lips lingering on mine longer than usual. There was a challenge in her kiss, a promise that she wasn't done with me yet. That night, as I lay awake in her bed, I felt the weight of my lies pressing down on me. The web I had spun was becoming too tangled, too complex, and it was only a matter of time before something snapped. The thought of losing everything, Lisa, my marriage, the life I had built, was terrifying. But even more terrifying was the idea that I couldn't stop. I had become addicted to the deception, to the thrill of living multiple lives. I had convinced myself that I could keep it all going, that I could juggle all these women without getting caught. But deep down, I knew the truth. The walls were closing in, and it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. It was a Thursday evening, and I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, a routine that had become second nature. Tonight was dinner with Lisa, an ordinary date night that we had religiously stuck to for years. But in my mind, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about the lies I needed to manage, the lives I had to keep separate, and the thrill that came with every close call. I had learned to thrive under pressure. I had become an expert at juggling, keeping Olivia, Sarah, and Jessica in their own lanes, ensuring that none of them ever collided with the life I shared with Lisa. It wasn't just about lying anymore. It was about control. The more complicated it became, the more I seemed to enjoy it. Dinner with Lisa was always the same. Small talk about her day at school, plans for the weekend, the occasional shared laugh. And I played my part perfectly. I asked about her students, teased her about the adorable stories she would tell me about their antics, and smiled in all the right places. To anyone watching, we were a happy couple, deeply in love, living the dream. But that night, as Lisa excused herself to use the restroom, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was Jessica. My pulse quickened. "You're with her, aren't you?" For a moment, I froze. She had never texted me while I was with Lisa before. It was an unspoken rule, a boundary that I thought we had both agreed on. But Jessica wasn't the type to follow rules, not for long. "We talked about this? Not tonight." I hit send, glancing up to make sure Lisa wasn't nearby. My heart was pounding now, not from fear, but from excitement. The line between danger and thrill had blurred long ago, and part of me loved how close I was skating to the edge. "Don't worry, I'm not going to blow your cover, yet." That word, yet, sent a chill down my spine. Jessica was unpredictable, and her unpredictability was both what drew me to her and what terrified me. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now, not when I had managed to keep everything so neatly contained for so long. Lisa returned, oblivious to the silent chaos unraveling in my pocket. She smiled at me, the kind of warm, genuine smile that I didn't deserve. Guilt flickered in my chest, but I quickly pushed it away. I had become skilled at compartmentalizing my emotions, at separating the different versions of myself that I had created. After dinner, we drove home in comfortable silence, Lisa resting her hand on mine as I steered the car through the familiar streets of our neighborhood. I was deep in thought, already calculating how I would manage the next few days. Olivia wanted to see me over the weekend. Sarah had mentioned something about meeting up for lunch. And Jessica? Jessica was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. When we got home, I kissed Lisa goodnight, making the usual excuses about having to finish up some late-night work. She never questioned it. She trusted me implicitly, and that trust was the foundation upon which I had built my entire web of deception. As soon as Lisa fell asleep, I retreated to the living room, my phone in hand. There were messages waiting for me. One from Olivia, another from Sarah, and of course, another from Jessica. "I miss you. Are we still on for this weekend? I've been thinking about you all day. Can we meet tomorrow? You can't keep me waiting forever." I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck as I tried to figure out how to manage it all. Each woman was becoming more demanding, more invested in my time, and it was becoming harder to keep them in check. Olivia, with her sharp intuition, was getting closer to uncovering the truth. Sarah, sweet and trusting, was starting to expect more than I could give. And Jessica? Well, Jessica was playing her own game, and I wasn't sure of the rules anymore. I texted Olivia first, confirming our weekend plans. I told Sarah that I'd try to see her tomorrow, knowing full well that I would likely have to cancel at the last minute. And as for Jessica, I hesitated. I wasn't sure what to say to her. She was the wild card, the one I couldn't predict. But I had to keep her satisfied, at least for now. "I'll see you soon. Be patient." I hit send, hoping it would be enough to placate her, at least for the time being. The thrill of juggling these lives, of weaving my lies so carefully, was beginning to take its toll. The constant balancing act, the need to be in control of every detail, was exhausting. But at the same time, I couldn't stop. It was like an addiction, and no matter how dangerous it became, I was hooked. The next day, I found myself in the middle of yet another balancing act. I had promised to meet Sarah for lunch, but Olivia had called, insisting that we meet earlier than planned. I couldn't say no to either of them, so I did what I always did. I improvised. I met Olivia for coffee in the morning, feigning interest in the conversation while my mind raced, planning my next move. I made sure to keep the meeting short, making some excuse about a last-minute work call. She didn't seem entirely convinced, but she let it go, for now. Next was Sarah. By the time I met her, my mind was already buzzing with the strain of keeping everything straight. She smiled at me, her eyes lighting up as I sat down across from her. She was so innocent, so trusting. It made lying to her easier, but it also made me feel worse, in a way I couldn't quite shake. As we talked, I could feel the weight of my double life pressing down on me. For the first time in a long while, I started to wonder how long I could keep this up. How long before one of them found out? How long before the whole thing came crashing down? But even as that thought crossed my mind, I knew the answer. I would keep going for as long as I could, because the thrill, the danger, was too intoxicating to give up. The tension in my life was growing like a shadow I couldn't outrun. The thrill of juggling these women, the power I felt from controlling my lies, was slowly turning into something else, something darker. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, gnawing at me, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. Guilt. It was a word I had long since pushed aside. Guilt was for those who got caught, for those who didn't know how to manage their lives like I did. But now, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping out of my grasp. It wasn't just about getting caught anymore. It was about the cost, the toll it was taking on me, on my marriage, and even on the women who had become unknowingly entangled in my mess. It started one morning when I woke up next to Lisa, as I had done 1,000 times before. She was still asleep, her body curled up next to mine, peaceful and oblivious. Normally, I would have looked at her with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that I had managed to keep my secrets intact. But that morning, something felt different. I stared at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to remorse. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be married to a man who spent his days and nights lying to her, building a world of deception behind her back. She had always been loyal, always supportive, and I had turned our marriage into a farce, a web of lies so complex that even I was beginning to lose track of them. As I watched her sleep, I felt a pang of something I hadn't felt in a long time: regret. The guilt didn't stop with Lisa. It followed me through the day, gnawing at me during meetings, lingering in the back of my mind while I texted Olivia, Sarah, and Jessica. Each message another thread in the tangled web I had created. Olivia was starting to press harder, her questions more frequent, her suspicions growing. I could sense that she was beginning to piece things together, though she hadn't confronted me yet. Her messages were sharper, more pointed, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she demanded answers I wasn't prepared to give. "Are you sure you're not hiding something from me?" I stared at the text, my heart racing. I had to be careful. I couldn't afford for her to dig too deep. "Of course not. Why would you think that?" "You've been acting strange lately, distracted." She wasn't wrong. I was distracted. But it wasn't just her. It was everything. My life, my lies, the constant strain of keeping it all together. I had never let it show before, but now the cracks were beginning to form, and I could feel them widening with every passing day. Then there was Sarah, sweet, trusting Sarah. She still hadn't pushed too hard, still believed my excuses, but she was starting to want more time, more attention, more commitment, things I couldn't give her without risking everything. We met for lunch that afternoon at a quiet little cafe where no one would recognize me. Sarah was her usual self, smiling, warm, eager to share stories about her life, her work. But as I sat across from her, nodding and smiling in all the right places, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leading her on, dragging her deeper into a relationship that had no future. She didn't deserve this either. None of them did. But what could I do? Ending things with any of them would be like pulling on a thread that could unravel the whole tapestry. And the thought of losing control, of everything falling apart, terrified me. I was walking a tightrope, and the balancing act was becoming harder by the day. Then there was Jessica. She was different from the others, more unpredictable, more dangerous. She didn't demand my time or attention in the same way Olivia and Sarah did, but she had a way of making me feel like I was always one step away from losing control, like she knew more than she let on. I had tried to keep her at a distance, to manage her like I managed the others, but Jessica was too sharp, too cunning. She had a way of getting under my skin, of making me feel exposed, vulnerable. And that terrified me more than anything else. That evening, as I sat alone in my office, staring at my phone, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. The lies, the guilt, the constant fear that everything could come crashing down at any moment. For the first time, I started to wonder if it was all worth it. Was the thrill of the game really worth the risk? Was the control I thought I had just an illusion? I had always told myself that I could handle it, that I was different from other men who got caught up in their lies. But now, sitting there in the dim light of my office, I wasn't so sure anymore. The guilt was starting to creep in, and no matter how hard I tried to push it away, it wouldn't leave. My phone buzzed. A message from Jessica. "We need to talk." My heart skipped a beat. Those 4 words sent a wave of panic through me. Jessica never said things like that unless she had something serious on her mind. And I had a sinking feeling that whatever it wasn't going to be good. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What did she know? How much had she figured out? Was this the moment when everything would unravel? I typed a response, my fingers trembling slightly as I tried to stay calm. About what? The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally her reply came through. Everything. Everything. That one word was enough to send a cold shiver down my spine. Jessica's message sat on my phone screen, glowing in the dim light of my office, and for the first time since I had started this twisted game, I felt truly out of control. She had never been one to mince words, but this felt different. This felt final. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my mind racing through every possibility. Did she know about Olivia and Sarah? Had she uncovered more than I had anticipated? Or was she just toying with me, pushing my limits the way she always did? Jessica thrived on power plays, but this felt like something else. I knew I couldn't ignore her. Not this time. My pulse quickened as I typed a reply, each letter feeling like a step closer to the edge of a cliff I didn't want to fall off. "What do you mean? Everything?" I hit send, my heart pounding in my chest. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair as I tried to calm the rising panic. How had I let it get this far? How had I, the master of deception, allowed things to spiral so dangerously out of control? Moments later, my phone buzzed with her reply. "You know what I mean. I'm not stupid." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. There was no turning back now. I had to face whatever was coming, whether I was ready or not. I quickly typed back, "Let's meet, talk in person." There was a long pause before her next message came through, each second stretching on endlessly. "Tomorrow, same place." I stared at the message, my mind swirling with dread. Tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to deal with her, how to keep the delicate balance of my life from collapsing. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake next to Lisa, staring at the ceiling as the weight of my decisions pressed down on me. She was so peaceful, so unaware of the chaos I had brought into our marriage. I turned over, looking at her in the dim light filtering through the curtains, and the guilt hit me harder than ever before. For years, I had managed to keep my secrets hidden, to compartmentalize my life so carefully that even I started to believe in the illusion I had created. But now, with Jessica's cryptic messages and Olivia's growing suspicions, it felt like the walls were closing in. The next morning, I went through the motions of my day as if nothing was wrong. I kissed Lisa goodbye, pretended to focus at work, answered texts from Olivia and Sarah, all while the thought of my meeting with Jessica loomed over me like a dark cloud. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I was a mess. My usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a gnawing anxiety that I couldn't shake. I left work early, claiming I had a meeting, and headed to the cafe where Jessica and I had first met. The place where all of this had started. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back corner, her eyes fixed on me as I walked through the door. I could tell immediately that something had shifted between us. The playful, seductive energy that had always been part of our dynamic was gone. In its place was something colder, sharper. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile as I approached her. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "What's going on?" Jessica didn't smile. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. "You've been lying to me," she said, her voice low and controlled. "For a long time." I felt my stomach drop. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I haven't." "Don't," she interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "Don't insult my intelligence, okay? I know about Olivia. I know about Sarah, and I'm pretty sure your wife has no idea about any of us." I froze, the blood draining from my face. How the hell did she know? I had been so careful, so meticulous. I can explain," I stammered, scrambling for an excuse, a way out. Jessica shook her head, leaning back in her chair with a sigh. "You really think you're the first guy to try this with me? Juggling women, spinning lies, thinking you're invincible? I saw it from the start. I just didn't care enough to stop you. Until now." My heart pounded in my chest, and for the first time in my life, I was speechless. She had known all along, and yet she had let me play my game, waiting for the moment when she could rip it all apart. "I'm not going to say anything," Jessica said, her voice calm but laced with something darker. "Not yet, anyway. But here's the thing. You don't get to just walk away from this. From me. I don't know what your plan is with Olivia and Sarah, or your poor wife, but whatever it is, you're in too deep to just disappear." I swallowed, my throat dry. "What do you want?" Jessica smirked, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "For now, I want you to keep playing your little game. I want to watch how far you'll go, how much longer you think you can keep this up before it all falls apart." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't going to expose me, not yet, at least. But she was going to make me squirm, keep me on edge, always wondering when she might pull the trigger. Jessica didn't just want control. She wanted to watch me unravel. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. "You're sick," I muttered, my voice barely audible. She shrugged, her smirk widening. "Maybe. But then again, so are you." I left the cafe without another word, my mind spinning. Jessica had me exactly where she wanted me, and I had no idea how to get out of it. The lies were catching up to me, and I could feel the strain in every part of my life. As I drove home, the guilt that had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over. I couldn't keep this up forever. Something had to give, but what would it be? My marriage, my affairs, or my sanity? By the time I arrived home, my mind was in turmoil. Jessica had shattered the illusion I had so carefully constructed. For years, I had prided myself on being in control, on being able to keep all the threads of my double life neatly tied together. Now, I felt like a marionette, with Jessica holding the strings, waiting for the moment to pull them tight. Lisa greeted me at the door with her usual warmth, but I could barely muster a smile. The guilt was eating away at me, but more than that, the fear was starting to take root. Jessica's words echoed in my mind. She wasn't going to reveal anything just yet, but she was enjoying watching me squirm. How long could I keep this up before she changed her mind? We had dinner that night, but I barely tasted the food. Lisa chatted about her day, the small, ordinary things that used to make me feel grounded in my home life, but now they only felt like a facade, just another layer of the lies I had built. I could barely concentrate, my thoughts swirling with what might happen next. Jessica had too much power, and I had no idea how to take it back. After dinner, Lisa mentioned wanting to go to bed early. Normally, I would have taken the opportunity to check in with Olivia or Sarah, but tonight, I couldn't. Not with Jessica's shadow looming over me. Instead, I nodded, giving Lisa a distracted kiss on the cheek, and watched her head upstairs. Alone in the kitchen, I poured myself a drink, needing something to dull the anxiety that gnawed at my insides. The whiskey burned as it slid down my throat, but it did nothing to ease the tension coiling tighter and tighter in my chest. I knew I had to do something, anything, but I couldn't see a way out. Then my phone buzzed. I jumped, my heart skipping a beat as I glanced at the screen. It was Olivia. "We need to talk. I have a feeling you're hiding something from me." The words made my stomach drop. Not again. Not now. Olivia had always been the sharpest of the three, and lately she had been growing more suspicious. I should have known this was coming, but with everything happening with Jessica, I had let my guard down. I had to think fast. If Olivia started digging, it would be over. Not just with her, but with everything. She was too smart, too intuitive. If she found out about Sarah, or worse, Lisa, everything would unravel. I typed back quickly. "Me. I'm not hiding anything. Can we talk about this in person? Tomorrow? Maybe?" I hoped to buy myself some time to figure out how to smooth things over before she pushed too far. But I could feel the panic rising again, the sense that no matter what I did, the walls were closing in on me. Olivia didn't respond right away, and I took another sip of whiskey, trying to calm myself down. But just as I was starting to relax, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Olivia. It was Sarah. "Hey, I miss you. Can we meet tomorrow? I really need to see you." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. 2 of them, in one night. Both wanting more of me than I could give, both creeping closer to the truth. And then there was Jessica, still lurking in the background, holding all the cards. I downed the rest of my drink, my mind racing. How had I let things get so far out of control? For years, I had managed this delicate balancing act, keeping each woman in her own little world, none of them the wiser. But now, it felt like I was walking a tightrope, and any misstep would send everything crashing down. I needed a plan, something to regain control. But what? The next day came faster than I wanted it to, and I could feel the pressure mounting as soon as I woke up. Lisa was getting ready for work, her usual cheerful self, while I pretended that nothing was wrong. I kissed her goodbye, watching her walk out the door, and for the first time, I felt a pang of real fear. How much longer before she found out? How much longer before my entire life crumbled? As soon as Lisa was gone, I texted Olivia. "Me. I can meet you later today. Coffee at the usual place?" I needed to get ahead of this, to calm her suspicions before they got out of hand. But as I sent the message, my phone buzzed again. It was Sarah, confirming our plans for later that afternoon. I was supposed to meet Olivia in the morning, and now Sarah in the afternoon. The juggling act was becoming impossible. I arrived at the cafe to meet Olivia, my nerves frayed. She was already there, sitting at a small table near the window, her arms crossed and a look of quiet suspicion on her face. This wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her, trying to sound casual. Olivia didn't smile. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. I nodded, my stomach tightening. "Okay, what's on your mind?" She leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "You've been distant, you cancel plans, you're distracted when we're together, and I can't shake the feeling that something's going on." I forced a smile, trying to play it off. "It's just work. Things have been crazy lately." But Olivia wasn't buying it. "I don't believe you. I've been patient, but something isn't right, and I need to know if you're seeing someone else." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment I had dreaded. If she pushed any harder, if she found out about Sarah or Jessica, or worse, Lisa, it would be over. I took a deep breath, leaning forward to meet her gaze. "Olivia, there's no one else. I promise. You're the only one." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I had no choice. I couldn't afford to lose her, not now, not when everything was already so precarious. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing as if she was weighing my words. Finally, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Okay," she said softly. "But if I find out you're lying to me, we're done. Understand?" I nodded, relief flooding through me. "I understand, and I'm not lying." But as I left the cafe, I knew the clock was ticking. Olivia wasn't convinced. Not really. She had given me a temporary reprieve, but it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, she would dig deeper, and when she did, everything would fall apart. Later that afternoon, I met Sarah. She was waiting for me at the small park where we often met, her face lighting up when she saw me. She was different from Olivia, softer, less suspicious, but I could see that she too was starting to want more from me. More time, more commitment. We sat on a bench, talking about nothing in particular, but I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. How long before Sarah too started asking questions I couldn't answer? The day ended with me more exhausted than I had been in years. I had managed to keep both Olivia and Sarah satisfied, for now, but the cracks were showing. And with Jessica holding all the cards, it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. I was running out of time, out of lies, and I knew it. The days following my meetings with Olivia and Sarah were a blur of anxiety and dread. No matter how much I reassured them, the cracks in my carefully constructed world were growing wider. Olivia was still suspicious. Sarah was growing more emotionally attached. And Jessica, well, Jessica was waiting, watching, holding the threat of exposure over my head like a sword ready to drop. Every text, every call, Every interaction felt like a countdown to disaster. It was a Friday evening when things finally began to unravel. Lisa had planned a quiet night in, just the two of us. She had made dinner, something she knew I loved, spaghetti carbonara, a dish she had perfected over the years. The smell filled the house, and for a moment, I wished that I could just stay in this moment. Just Lisa and me. No lies, no other women, no tangled web of deception. But even as I sat down to eat, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it out of reflex and saw Jessica's name flash across the screen. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Tonight. My heart skipped a beat. Tonight? What was she planning? I had no time to think, no time to process. Lisa noticed the look on my face and frowned. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. I forced a smile, slipping my phone into my pocket. "Yeah, just work stuff. You know how it is." But she didn't look convinced. I could see the doubt in her eyes, the faint flicker of suspicion that I hadn't seen before. Was she starting to suspect too? Had my lies finally begun to seep into the one part of my life I had sworn to keep clean? My marriage? Dinner felt like a blur. I tried to engage, to act normal, but my mind kept drifting back to Jessica. What did she mean by tonight? Was she going to show up here? Confront me? Confront Lisa? After dinner, Lisa suggested we watch a movie together. Normally, I would have jumped at the chance for a quiet night in, but my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Jessica. "Can I see you? I need to talk." I could feel the walls closing in. Olivia was getting more demanding, and I knew I couldn't keep brushing her off. But tonight? Tonight was the worst possible time. I glanced at Lisa, who was settling onto the couch, waiting for me to join her. I need to step out for a bit," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "There's something I need to handle for work." Lisa looked up at me, her brow furrowed. "Now? It's late." "I won't be long," I said, already grabbing my jacket. "Just a quick meeting, I promise." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the worry in her eyes. "Okay," she said quietly. "But don't be too long, all right?" I nodded, planting a quick kiss on her forehead before heading out the door. As soon as I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me, and the weight of everything I had been juggling crashed down on me. I couldn't keep doing this. Not for much longer. I texted Olivia, telling her I couldn't meet tonight, making up some excuse about a work emergency. But even as I sent the message, I knew she wasn't going to accept it much longer. Olivia wasn't stupid. She was already piecing things together, and soon she would demand the truth. And then there was Jessica. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind racing. What was she planning? She hadn't texted me again, but I knew her well enough to understand that when Jessica said, "tonight," she meant it. I couldn't go home. Not until I figured out what she was up to. I found myself parked outside the coffee shop where Jessica and I had met so many times before. It was late, the streets quiet, but my nerves were anything but calm. I checked my phone again. No new messages from Jessica, but the silence was more terrifying than anything she could have said. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted her. "What's going on?" Her response was almost immediate. "Come to my apartment, now." My hands were trembling as I typed back. "I can't. Not tonight. If you don't come, I'll make sure you regret it." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. This was it, the breaking point. Jessica wasn't bluffing this time. If I didn't show up, she would do something drastic, and I couldn't let that happen, not when everything was already hanging by a thread. I started the car and drove to Jessica's apartment, my heart pounding with every mile. When I arrived, I sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to steady my nerves. I couldn't afford to lose control now, not when the stakes were this high. I made my way up to her apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I knocked on the door, it swung open almost immediately. Jessica stood there, her arms crossed, her eyes cold and calculating. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "I didn't have a choice," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on? Why are you doing this?" Jessica stepped aside, letting me in. The apartment was dimly lit, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "I'm tired of waiting," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Tired of being one of your little secrets. I told you, I can't just..." She cut me off with a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Can't what? Leave your wife?" End things with the others? You think you can keep this going forever? I know you, and I know how this ends. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. Jessica, please, let's just talk about this. You don't get to talk anymore, she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. You've lied to me, to them, to your wife, and I'm done playing nice. I took a step back, realizing just how precarious my situation had become. Jessica wasn't just angry, she was ready to burn everything down, and there was nothing I could say to stop her. What do you want? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jessica smiled, but it was a cold, calculated smile. I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything, to watch your perfect little life fall apart, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but there was none. I had pushed Jessica too far, and now there was no going back. The breaking point had come, and all I could do was wait for the fallout. The silence that followed Jessica's words was suffocating. I stood frozen in her apartment, my mind racing through every possible scenario, every way out of this nightmare. But there was nothing. No easy escape, no simple lie that could undo what had been set in motion. Jessica walked around the room slowly, almost leisurely, as if savoring the tension in the air. She was in control, and she knew it. Her power over me wasn't just in the secrets she held, it was in the way she had manipulated the situation, knowing exactly how and when to strike. What's your plan, Jessica? I finally asked, my voice hoarse. You can't just destroy everything. What's in it for you? She turned to face me, her smirk still in place. What's in it for me? Revenge, satisfaction, maybe a little justice. Call it whatever you want, but I'm done letting you call the shots. I swallowed hard, feeling the noose tightening around my neck. You don't have to do this. We can figure something out. Just tell me what you want, and I'll... You don't get it, do you? She interrupted, her voice rising. This isn't about what I want anymore. It's about watching you squirm, watching everything you built fall apart, just like you deserve. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Jessica wasn't just angry. She was hell-bent on seeing me ruined. And from the look in her eyes, I knew she wasn't bluffing. There was nothing left for her to gain except the pleasure of my downfall. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to appeal to some shred of decency left in her. You don't have to hurt Lisa. She's innocent in all of this. Whatever you're angry about, it's me, not her. Jessica's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of something. Remorse? Regret? But it disappeared just as quickly, replaced by the same cold calculation that had brought me here in the first place. You should have thought about that before you lied to me, she said quietly, before you lied to all of us. I ran a hand through my hair, desperation clawing at my chest. Jessica, please, we can fix this. She held up a hand, silencing me. It's too late for that. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I reached for it instinctively, but Jessica's sharp gaze stopped me cold. Who is it? She asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. I hesitated, not sure whether to tell her the truth. It's Lisa, I muttered, glancing down at the screen. Her name lit up the display, along with a message that chilled me to the bone. Lisa, where are you? We need to talk. I found something. My heart stopped. What had she found? My mind raced through every possibility. An old text, an email, something I had overlooked in my scramble to keep the lies intact. The worst-case scenarios flashed before my eyes, each one more damning than the last. Jessica must have seen the panic in my face because her smirk widened. Looks like your little house of cards is finally collapsing. I turned away from her, feeling the walls closing in. I need to go, I muttered, already moving toward the door. I need to fix this before. You're not going anywhere, Jessica snapped, stepping in front of me, blocking my path. You don't get to just run off and try to save yourself. Not this time. I stopped, staring at her in disbelief. What do you want from me? Jessica's expression softened for a brief moment, and I thought, just for a second, that maybe, just maybe, I could appeal to her humanity. But then her face hardened again, and I knew the truth. There was no going back. She wanted me to burn. I want you to watch everything crumble, she said softly, just like I did. I couldn't wait any longer. I pushed past her, rushing out of the apartment and down the stairs, my heart racing. I didn't know what Lisa had found, but I knew I was running out of time. I needed to get home, to confront her, to try and salvage whatever was left of my life before it was too late. As I drove home, the panic inside me grew. Lisa's message replayed in my head over and over. I found something. What had she found? My mind spun through the possibilities, but the truth was, it didn't matter. Whatever it was enough to make her suspicious, enough to make her reach out with that chilling message. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for a single light in the living room window. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to figure out what I would say. But nothing came. There were no more lies left to tell, no more stories to spin. This was it. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling like lead as I walked toward the front door. My hands were shaking as I turned the key in the lock, and as the door creaked open, I saw Lisa sitting on the couch, her phone in hand, a look of quiet devastation on her face. "Lisa," I began, my voice trembling. "I can explain." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hurt and anger. "Can you?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you really explain all of this?" She held up her phone, and I saw the messages. Messages I had thought were hidden, deleted, buried. Messages between me and Olivia, between me and Sarah. Messages that exposed everything. My heart sank. There was nothing left to say. No more lies, no more excuses. The truth had finally unraveled, and now I had to face the consequences. "I trusted you," Lisa whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I trusted you with everything. How could you do this to me, to us?" The pain in her voice cut through me like a knife. I had always told myself that I could keep the lies separate, that I could have it all without ever hurting anyone. But now, as I stood there, watching my wife, my real life, fall apart in front of me, I realized how wrong I had been. "I'm sorry," I choked out, the words sounding hollow, even to me. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't mean to. Stop," she said, her voice trembling. "Just stop." I fell silent, watching as the woman I loved, truly loved, crumpled under the weight of my betrayal. "I can't do this anymore," Lisa whispered, standing up, her hands shaking. "I can't live with the lies. I can't live with you." My heart shattered. There was no fixing this, no going back. "Lisa, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "We can work through this. I'll do anything." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's too late." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing alone in the wreckage of my life. The truth had finally unraveled, and with it, everything I had ever cared about. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house like the final nail in the coffin. Lisa was gone. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. My world, this intricate web of deception I had woven so carefully over the years, had finally collapsed, and I was left alone, standing amidst the ruins. I sank down onto the couch, my head in my hands, trying to process the reality of what had just happened. Lisa knew. She had seen the messages, discovered the truth, and now she was gone. The one person who had been the anchor in my life, the one person who I had taken for granted, had finally reached her breaking point. The silence in the house was unbearable. It was a silence that I had never known before, a silence that screamed with the weight of my betrayal. I stared at my phone, at the screen where the messages with Olivia and Sarah were still open. I knew I had to do something. I had to reach out to them, to try and salvage whatever was left of the wreckage. But as my fingers hovered over the keyboard, I realized that there was no fixing this. Not with them. Not with anyone. Jessica had won. I had been so focused on controlling the game, on keeping all the pieces in place, that I hadn't seen her for what she truly was, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. And now, it had all blown up in my face. But it wasn't just Jessica, it was me. I had made the choices, told the lies, and played with people's lives as if they were nothing more than pieces on a chessboard. And now, I was reaping the consequences. I scrolled through my contacts, hesitating as my thumb hovered over Jessica's name. I knew I should call her, confront her, demand to know why she had pushed things so far. But what was the point? She had done exactly what she had said she would do. She had watched me unravel, and now she was probably laughing at the chaos she had caused. Instead, I texted her. "You won. It's over." I stared at the message for a long time before hitting send, feeling a strange sense of finality as the words disappeared into the void. I didn't expect a response. I wasn't sure I even wanted one. Jessica had always been a force of destruction, and now that she had torn my life apart, there was nothing left to say. My phone buzzed almost immediately. It wasn't Jessica. I need to see you. We need to talk. The same message I had received from her countless times before, but this time it felt different. This time, I knew I couldn't go on lying to her. The truth was out, and there was no point in trying to salvage what little was left of my relationship with her. She would find out soon enough that Lisa knew. They all would. I took a deep breath, finally typing out the response I had been avoiding for so long. I can't. I'm sorry. It's over. I hit send, knowing that this would be the last message I ever sent her. Olivia deserved more than lies, more than a relationship built on deception. I had hurt her enough, and now it was time to let go. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call. Sarah. I couldn't answer. I couldn't face her. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, and then I blocked her number. It was cowardly, I knew that, but I couldn't bear to hear the pain in her voice, to listen to her as she asked the inevitable questions about why, about how I could have done this to her. I sat there in the dark, feeling the weight of it all crushing down on me. Everything was gone. Lisa, Olivia, Sarah, they were all gone, and I had no one to blame but myself. I thought about Lisa again, about the look in her eyes when she had discovered the truth. The betrayal, the devastation. I had destroyed her trust, shattered the foundation of our marriage. And for what? For the thrill of control? For the adrenaline rush of living multiple lives? The answer seemed so hollow now. The excitement that had once driven me felt empty in the face of what I had lost. I stood up, pacing the living room, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be found. No justification for the lies I had told, for the pain I had caused. I had spent years crafting this perfect image of myself, a devoted husband, a charming lover, a man who could have it all. But it had all been a lie I could no longer keep up. And now, the consequences were staring me in the face. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside into the night, the cold air biting at my skin. I walked aimlessly, my mind numb. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that house. Not tonight. I found myself at a park, the same park where I had met Sarah so many times before. The memories of our conversations, our stolen moments, felt distant now, like fragments of a life that no longer belonged to me. I sat on a bench, staring up at the sky, wondering how I had gotten here. How had I become this person? The man who had it all and threw it away for the sake of a thrill. The man who had lied to the people who loved him, who had betrayed the woman who had stood by him through everything. And then, for the first time in years, I cried. I cried for the life I had lost, for the people I had hurt, for the love I had destroyed. I cried for Lisa, for the woman I had promised to love and protect, and for the man I had become, a man I no longer recognized. The tears came in waves, and I let them. I had spent too long hiding, too long pretending that I was in control, that everything would be fine. But nothing was fine. Nothing had been fine for a long time. Eventually, the tears stopped, leaving me feeling empty. I sat there, staring at the stars, wondering what came next. The consequences of my actions had finally caught up with me, and now I had to face them. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something else. It wasn't relief. It was too soon for that. But it was something like acceptance. Acceptance that I couldn't keep living the way I had been. Acceptance that I had lost everything and there was no going back. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I could never be the man I had been again. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something better. The end.